I think we were smoking a lot of hash or something. But so he creates this game, this AD&D thing, and we rolled up characters with the other people in the crew. And that was my first experience in role-playing. And it was a complete disaster. We were hopeless. But it sort of sunk its teeth into me. And Cam subsequently actually joined me in Victoria in the writers program there. So we were just flatmates for a while. We just started running this game, and it just built from there. And of course, as two archaeologists, we just sort of, that's what interested us. We just sort of built and built and built the history of this world. But oddly enough, most of it that we gained is actually the background to what we wrote. So it's not those stories. Later on, I ended up taking 4 or 5 players through a whole campaign that became part of the 10-book series. But all the foundation stuff was actually all background. And again, I can see why Fafford and Grey Mouser sort of worked so well as a duo, because we ended up running some one-on-one games, and the entire night session would be conversation. Nobody would pull a sword. And so it was all character-based and all character building. And for writers, the notion that I recommend RPGs for writers, even if you don't read fantasy or science fiction, because it really teaches humility as a writer, because you have your plot and you have things you want to drive through your story, but you don't have any control over your characters, because there are other people, and so they can just take that story anywhere they want to, and that's a great experience, because then when you go into the actual writing process, there's that element of spontaneity where your character might just take off on you, and you have to have that humility to just let it go and run with it.
I would only, my only cavil is that I don't think, from my own experience, you don't have to be doing a role-playing game to lose complete control over your characters. It's actually rather easy to do. But no, I think, but for much the same reasons, which is that, in my case, I have a kind of a personal mantra, which is trust the character. And that means once I have basically created a character, that character is essentially real. And that means that from that point on, I cannot bend them, change them, rejigger them in some way to make them more plot friendly. I've told a story many times about the idea that one sometimes has, okay, at the end of the book, somebody has to sacrifice themselves for the main character. I'll give you the very short version. And so you need a character who will, jump out and take a spear for the main character. But the problem is that, if the character only shows up in the last 5 minutes of this multi-volume thing, that's the equivalent of the red shirt, everybody's gonna know. So, what you do is you have to introduce them early. Well, it doesn't do any good to introduce a character that nobody cares about, so you have to give them a personality, and you have to wrap them into the plot, and you have to let them develop as a character. But of course, then what happens sometimes is you get to that point and you go, all right, the time has come, the spear is in the air, and the character that you created for this moment looks at you and goes, I wouldn't do that in a million freaking years, no way I'm jumping in front of a spear for somebody else, and you realize, no, they wouldn't. I have let this character become who they are, and they wouldn't do it. And the only thing you can do at that point is another specialty of mine, which is having lots and lots of other characters. So you just grab some poor bastard who thought he was just there to see the spearing and go, guess what? You're now one of the stars. Get him out there, just and and it all happens. But that original character is still standing over there going, yeah, I wasn't going to do that. No way. So I think that most of my favorite, and I don't know, I'm sure that there are many other ways that other writers have to do it. I can see it in your work. I can see that, the effect that what you're talking about doing role-playing has had on them. And I hope that's obvious in my work as well. And I see it in a lot of other writers I like. It seems to me that's absolutely crucial, though, and it's one of the things that new writers tend to go one of two ways. They either try and squeeze the characters into the story or plot that they have, or they fall in love with the characters and then they can't make a plot around it because, for whatever reason. when you were doing, did any of your initial RPG characters make it into the
Yeah, quite a few.
Okay.
Yeah, but less so as the series went on. So a novel has different demands than running a game, so you create characters specifically for the novels. And that just sort of built as it went. But I mean, it's a 3 million word series, so
Yeah.
you know, I needed to come up with some new characters.
Just a few. Yeah.
Just a few.
Just a few. When you were planning this in the first place, okay, you mentioned archaeology. I have, although I don't have your training, I have a kind of a bent in that direction as well. It crops up a lot in my work. People are basically stumbling over lost cities and stuff every few minutes in my books. So give me something evocative, I guess is what I'm saying. Tell me what got you into archaeology, and what is it about archaeology that makes that kind of stuff keep coming up in your work? What are you reacting to? What are you working with?
Well, I'll give you an example. I worked in Belize in Central America in 1983. It was a paleo dig, so it was 9,000 year old stone tools rather than the Mayan stuff that you would normally see. And the project was run by Boston University and Peabody Foundation. And when the project finished, I decided to throw my backpack on my shoulders and explore the rest of Central America. Well, that turned out to be something of a mistake. I went down into Honduras and then into Nicaragua, and I was sort of forcibly removed from Nicaragua, and I ended up in an airstrip in a jungle in Guatemala in the north. And this was at a time when the Civil War was, and the genocide was just in full swing. All the local native peoples were being driven from the good lands and ending up in Mexico ultimately. So they were going through the Petén. But at some point, I did find myself at the site of Tikal, which is sort of your classic Mayan ruin, because it's right in the middle of the jungle. And I remember climbing the main pyramid and looking out and seeing nothing but jungle and then these mounds, which were other pyramids that had been grown over and broken down. And it suddenly struck me that at some point, probably around 1100 AD, whatever, there was a Mayan priest standing right where I was. And he was looking out on this, and all he was seeing was nothing but farmland out to the horizons. And he must have thought this was going to last forever. And it didn't. And so you get that sense of mortality with archaeology. And that is the sense I wanted to infuse into the fantasy setting, because quite often, especially beginning writers, when they create a fantasy setting, it's almost static. It's as if nothing has changed, and nothing does change. There's no technological advancement. Usually they use magic as the excuse for that. But I like the sense of a fantasy setting where the cultures are all in transition. They're all in crisis in some fashion or another, just like ours are. And so you get that sense of malleability and transformation. And when you create a setting like that, the characters cannot help but be transformed as well. So you're actually driving characterization when you do that. And so that's one way in which I write about cultures and conflict. And that's what the archaeology has brought me.
I very much, I mean, I'm kind of with you on all of that stuff. Another thing that I say a lot is the stuff that's most fascinating to me are things that happen along the edges and boundaries where systems of any kind, whether these are cultural systems, geological systems, whatever you want to talk about, where systems come together at the boundaries and influence each other and change each other and create things that are not that were not there before, and that are more than the sum of either of the parts involved, or any of the parts involved. But one of the other things that always, and one of the reasons this kind of stuff comes up in my work too, is that it's always the idea that, you know, I can't remember what the actual statement is, but there's an old saying about how we are literally breathing, you know, Caesar's dust, you know, in our everyday lives. That everything that existed, you know, is still with us. It's still trapped on this same little blue ball with us in the middle of the universe, as far as we're concerned anyway, it's the middle. And